Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital Lending. And joining me, as always, the guy who wakes up every day at 6:20 and pounds that alarm clock inside, the Groundhog Day himself, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul.
Michael, how are you?
Like I said, more of the same. We're in week 6, kind of middle of week 6 as we quarantine as we record this on April 21st. So, kind of more of the same. Looks like yesterday the oil market had an interesting day. Went to from 17, $18 to negative 37. So I would have had the over in that action and lost the bet.
It's amazing how oil prices, that was a futures contract going into May, I guess, and they were trying to unwind positions. And there were so many people that didn't want to take possession of the oil because there wasn't enough swimming pools in people's backyards that were big enough to take 1,000 barrels of oil if they got it pushed to them. So they had to unwind it as quickly as they can, and they were paying people to take their oil positions. So, yeah, it was a wild day, on the last day of the trading day for that oil contract. So just craziness in the market itself right now. Things that you would think typically would make sense don't make sense. And so I'm glad that you and I are together, just kind of talk a little bit about real estate again today. And, if you ever have watched Seinfeld episode, the Seinfeld premise really was a show about nothing. And this is going to be kind of a podcast about nothing in the real estate business. So to help us kind of understand what's going on, which is nothing in the market, I thought we'd talk with one of the top producing commercial real estate guys for Newmark, and that is Jakob Andersen, to join us. And I want to get some of his insight about what they're doing, what they're seeing. Is there blood in the street these days? What is the impact of this coronavirus on their business? And so it's going to be a podcast a lot about nothing. So Jakob Andersen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. And I am excited about talking about nothing.
So people who don't know you very well or haven't met you, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do for Newmark.
Sure. So to start with today, what I'm doing, I am a multifamily broker with Newmark in Dallas with a focus on workforce housing, BC space in the DFW market. We have a local office here. I got 5 partners. We are typically a shop that's producing between $1.3 billion to $2 billion in assets a year. Now, for obvious reasons, this year will probably be a little slower than the others. But that's what I'm currently doing. And to give it a little context of my past, I used to be on the other side, on the development side and the ownership side of some of these BC properties. And I had the chance to live through the last cycle in 2008 to 2012 and seen some of this from a different angle. So trying to put the pieces together and find the path for tomorrow.
What kind of production did you guys do in 2019 out of your office? You said close to $2 billion.
Yeah, so last year we produced for right around $1.8 billion. And I would say that we had a good amount of deals that fell into at the beginning of 2020. And we did see the production continuing. The market was great right up until here in March or mid-March. We really saw all strong tendencies in the DFW market in Texas across the board. And then overnight, things stopped.
Yeah, because you had how many deals did you guys have out? I know you had a few out, for a couple on escrow and one on the market for us. That all's kind of for the same reason, but ultimately they all ended up getting put on the shelf for now. How many deals did you guys have out that? And of those deals, how many actually consummated, and how many did you guys kind of pull back? I guess roughly speaking.
Yeah, I think roughly we were looking at going in here in March, sitting on about 20 deals that we were actively marketing, and with another 10 to 15 coming to market in short order. Out of those, we are currently seeing about four deals that are still being worked on. And saying the wheels are stopped, they're not completely stopped. We still have deals that are being worked out, but it's on a different premise than yesterday. So we all have to be a little bit more patient and understand how deals are being put together these days. And so it's definitely the majority of the deals, they're put on the shelves right now. And the main reason I would say is this is short term. We're still gathering data of how the market is going to react. And I think you have owners that would like to sell, but we can't quantify if there should be a discount in there or how to actually find a path for a buyer to put the deal together. So the natural progression is, hey, let's take a little break here and wait and collect more data.
So to be specific, so how many deals did you guys? So the date that we talked when we had Greg Willett on was the date everything started. We all kind of pinpoint it, which was I think the 13th of March is when Tom Hanks announced he had the COVID-19. So I think once that kind of happened, sort of the next day, everything started really kind of falling apart in the capital markets, in the stock market. So how many deals do you guys have that kind of have closed kind of that mid-March and later? And how many deals, of those deals, I mean, do they all have like financing already pretty much handled? Were they loan assumptions? What were some of the reasons why the deals that did fell apart?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to financing. You have Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that they go through the motions, but then you also have a lot of these bigger private funds that have set up bridge programs that have been very popular to utilize here the last couple of years. Now, it's typically their cash they are deploying initially, and then they'll hedge the bet with other banks and whatnot. That's a business model that's very scary suddenly when the treasury is all over the board and we don't know what tomorrow is going to produce. So a lot of those lenders, they pull back immediately, and those deals are still sitting on the sideline. We did have a couple of deals after that date that still closed. They were far enough along, and they were done with banks, and we also had a Fannie Mae deal closing. However, these are all deals that have been far into the closing, and then it was all from strong buyers.
Did you see any deals out that were contemplated that closed with some sort of a price adjustment? And if so, kind of what kind of ranges were you seeing on the adjustments of deals that actually transacted?
We haven't seen so far our deals. They have actually closed as scheduled. We did not see it. You're here in the market on price adjustments, and that goes from 1-2% to 4-5%. Different reasons behind different situations. It is hard to really quantify any trend there. I think it's very specific to that deal and the components that made up that deal where it ended up. So I don't unfortunately have just a clear number on that.
Is there blood in the streets yet? That's what everybody wants to know.
Starting to see a little bit, Paul, and it's still too early to see where this is going. We have heard some of these special servicers kind of coming around and starting to talk about taking some deals back. Now, it has still not been executed since we're sitting about 45 days in here, but I'm certain it will happen. Now, the interesting part, I think, would be to see what's going to happen next. I think we have a lot of people that has been sitting and kind of waiting for a little bit of blood in the streets. And I do also get a lot of calls from people that would like to buy, but they want to buy on 50 cents on the dollar, 40 cents on the dollar, and it's below where sellers they are today. Not to say that it wouldn't be a scenario in the future, but there is definitely a gap still from where sellers that potentially are in trouble, they would like to sell out, and we still haven't heard directly from special servicers starting to put deals out, and so we haven't really heard directly from them yet.
Can you go through what a special servicer is? And when we talk about that type of information, a lot of people just don't understand who they should be talking to, or are you talking to the special servicer? What does that mean? And perhaps you and Michael can kind of give me some guidance about what a special servicer is.
Sure. And typically that's when you have your loan documents and you don't adhere to those loan documents and what has been put on you to execute, the lender, and that can be a bridge lender, it can be wherever, they can turn it over to this special service asset management team. And depending on their position, their goal is to work the situation out one way or the other. And one option is to basically take over the deal and run it with their new management company, and ultimately interview brokers for a sale of the asset. And that's what we saw back in the 2010 to 12, where the special servicers, they had a pipeline of deals that were given back to the bank or taken back by the lenders, and now they were working it out. And then they will typically go out and talk to different brokerage firms and go through that sales route. To go to a special servicer to actually get a deal, typically they have their hands tied to run some sort of process. So it is tough if you're a buyer out there just to say, hey, I'm going to go and buy a deal from a special servicer. There's a little bit more to it.
Let's kind of go through that one more time again, because if there becomes blood in the water and people are starting to have their properties being taken back by the lender, just like Jacob said, there's really two pathways. There is a regular servicer, and that's the person you typically talk to, who may work for a company like Arbor, as an example. And in the loan documents, it says that if you pay your bills on time, you don't need to talk with a special servicer. But the bond buyer who bought the loan has kind of an alternative, a different pathway. So if you don't agree to pay your payments on time, it's going to go to the special servicer, which is not going to be like Arbor, as an example. It may be Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo takes over the problem children, as we would say, and then they make decisions on what they're going to do. They may say, hey, let's give them more time, or they may decide to, by doing that, they'll put them in the penalty box, that they'll start collecting all the rents themselves, and they're going to try to work through the deal and see if they can save the deal on behalf of the bond buyer instead of going to foreclosure. But if they can't save the deal, then the special servicer has the rights to throw the property into foreclosure. And then they're the ones that are responsible for making sure the attorney's hired, the management company. They're not going to probably use the seller or the owner's, the current owner's management company. They may find another management company. They have to put some money into the deal. They probably have to front the property taxes that may have not been paid, may have not paid a bunch of the vendors in the deal. So they're the ones who are writing the checks out. Well, then they also have the ability to sell the property, because the special servicer or the lender themselves, again, that's going to be something different from the lender. The special servicer has the ability to buy the loan documents. They typically do not want to deal with an individual buying the property on a one-off basis, because what they're trying to do is, on behalf of the bond buyer who owns the deal, they want to get the highest price for the property. So they're going to go to companies like Newmark or CBRE or Marcus & Millichap, because they are trying to create or build a market to get the highest price. So if you call the special servicer, you knock on their door, it's going to be difficult because you're just a one-off buyer, and the loan documents are pretty much specific that they want them to bring it to a market that's being created to get the highest price for the property. So if they offer it to you and you accept it, that's not the highest and best price. Possibly it could be, but it probably is not going to be. They want to expose it to the market. So really, companies like Jakob at Newmark are going to get usually the first chance to market the deal, just because they can create a market in the deal. Mike, am I correct on that?
Yeah, I think that's it. You want to avoid kind of the inside job or the brother-in-law deal where, the servicer sells to their buddy and they keep in, and it avoids the fraudulent process of it as well. And then I think, my experience directly was working for, Community Bank, and then Wells Fargo bought our bank. So I have some workout experience both at the Community Bank and Wells Fargo on the balance sheet side. And at the Community Bank, you kind of solved your own problems. You had to work out your own loans. And then at Wells Fargo, a little bit larger institutional bank, once the deal kind of got in on the watch list, they would move it over into like the workout group, essentially. I can't remember what they called it internally, but this is a group that they staffed up to just do problem loan workout. And then once the loans were, either rehabbed, they would send them back to the production line, or if they didn't, they would, foreclose, collect on it, sell it in a very similar fashion to what you kind of mentioned, Paul. So none of that stuff happens overnight. So I know everyone's like, now is the best time to buy, but now as we started the podcast off, it's kind of a show about nothing because there's absolutely nothing going on right now. And it's going to take time for that to kind of work its way through the system. So I think, I don't know, Jacob, if you have your crystal ball on timeline when we start seeing some of this start happening, but I can't imagine it second quarter. Do you think third quarter, fourth quarter next year? What's kind of your wild guess here?
Yeah, that's the toughest thing right now, and I would put a short comment in there. I have been on a lot of bigger conference calls with people a lot smarter than me that talks about tomorrow, and the one trend I hear from everyone is they are much more reluctant to talk about tomorrow than they were in the past. I think this is uncharted territory, so everyone is looking at day by day and see kind of trying to find some of these reference points. And I'm no different. I'm looking at what April has provided us, and I think the next big data point for us is May collections to see what is the true impact within our industry here to tenants. And I think that's going to dictate a lot of how fast we're going to bounce back. Now, for the positive part, now I work for a company that's in multiple facets of real estate. And when we look at other parts of the sector, such as retail, office, we are actually very fortunate here because our recovery time will be faster. Multifamily is still deemed a necessity for us as humans. So I think our bounce back will be so much quicker. And when we look at the greater picture and going into on Paul's comment on oil yesterday, where if you have 2 trash cans, you can actually rent them out for $30 a piece to store oil from May. In a market like that, there's so much uncertainty, more uncertainty in other parts of real estate, but also the general market, where I think you can dissect multifamily fairly quick. It will rebound. We will rebound. The question is when. And I think that the more important part is, I think with what we know right now is multifamily will most likely rebound before a lot of other parts. So it becomes a question of what are you going to bet on? I still feel very strongly, despite of what we see in the market, that multifamily is a very, very solid investment. And that makes me feel good, despite of us sitting here and officing from home and living under these circumstances.
What do you tell folks today, whether let's say they don't own multifamily, is it a good time to build relationships with you? I mean, your hair has been on fire. I mean, you guys did $1.8 billion within 5 guys up in the Dallas area. I mean, you guys are kind of the center of the universe. Would you say somebody coming into the business that maybe never has, is this a good time to build a relationship with guys like you?
I would say that there's never, if you save something for tomorrow, I think you're wasting time. So that could be in the beginning of March. I would probably have said the same. Don't wait for when everything is picture perfect, because it's never going to be picture perfect. It's not picture perfect right now, but I do think there are going to be some opportunities coming for the reasons I just put out there in this sector. And I think it's still a good bet. So I would not sit on the sideline and say, well, let's take care of this situation, and now I want to enter. Because if you start that day, there are a lot of people that are way ahead of you, and it's tough to catch up. So I would spend this time. I do the same. I don't just sit back, even though we're talking about basically nothing here. We're not going to sit back. I'm planning for tomorrow, and I do that every day.
What are you seeing from the other guys you talk to? I know you and I talk on a regular basis, but some of the other operators, good, bad, anything you found kind of interesting from what people are doing or not doing right now that maybe you could share with everybody?
Yeah, so I think there was a fear in March of how April was going to go. No one really knew. Ultimately, the collection rates, they have come in positive. They're down, but they are less down than they expected. We did see people taking steps to work more, be more proactive with tenants in general, building that relationship. I think deals that have been proactive there, they are coming out stronger. We have seen the collections since it's not like it was the month before where people put payment plans in. So you might see a collection number on day 3 of the month that's low, but then they are catching up over time because they have put workout plans in place for the assets. So we're seeing a lot of people kind of planning for that. Some of the things we have seen is, and it will cost you money as an operator, taking credit cards and saying, look, you can put your rent here on credit cards. It's going to cost the owner between 2 and 3% in collections, but that is something we have seen people opening up to make sure they meet the tenants in the middle and they don't lose good tenants short term.
One of the things we've been having all the same questions, and we actually just opened up the credit card on option last week on I think the 2 or 3 highest delinquent assets that we own. So I have a call here this afternoon as we record this, and I'll kind of find out the update on that. But we were reluctant to do that out of the gate because it's like 3%, give or take, that Correct. we'd have to eat. So what we did last week, we decided to take the 3%, and they pay it, and we credit it towards their May rents, the 3% fee that the RE is going to charge us essentially. So that's what we're going to try. So I'm curious to see that work. We really were just for people that were currently delinquent for April, and we just kind of picked the top 3. I know other people said, hey, in late March, we'll give you $75 off if you pay April rent early, things like that. And I we chose not to do that because it felt like the people that were going to take advantage and pay the rent early were probably the most responsible tenants anyways, and they were going to pay you. And so you're giving away 5 or 7%, of your rent. If you have $1,000 average rent, you're giving 7.5% of that away. For residents are probably going to pay you anyways. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense. We're going to test on 1 or 2 assets as well. Last week we decided if you pay both May and June, we'll give you $100 off or something like that. But we're getting further out ahead in the collection. So I just cautious people to think about the ramifications, and if you're incentivizing people that would normally otherwise pay you to pay you early, you're probably just giving away some dollars that you maybe did or didn't have to do. So that's just me going off on that tangent that you inspired there. Any other questions, Paul, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. We've heard a number of operators that wanted to immediately give people discounts of $25 or $50 or $75 off right from the beginning, going into April or going into May of that they would have paid already. And so, you're just giving a concession right from the beginning that somebody was going to pay you. So I think going into May and June, I think you may have to play let's make a deal. But back in currently in April, I don't think you needed to do that totally. Jakob, any other things that you're hearing from operators that you think are good ideas to try to collect rent on? You talked about credit cards. Is there anything else that operators are using?
I think, I mentioned the credit card, and there are multiple ways to do it. There can be some upfront concessions, and that I've heard competitions of where if you pay May's rent this month here before the 1st, we're going to enter you into, a lottery of 1 month free rent, something like that. So you can skin the cat all sorts of different ways. I think the end goal is the same. I think what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from people is as much, and that's what's really going to come to the test. How engaged are you in your properties, and how are your communication lines with your tenants? I think that to have the pulse of your deal is extremely important to make sure you apply the right set of rules and help instead of just blindly going in to do it. It's no different than when you pick your amenity sets for a deal. You need to understand your audience. And I think that I've heard a lot of people spending the time and being on Zoom calls with their property managers, their leasing agents, to really get a sense for, hey, what is right and wrong to do here, so we can, whatever path we pick, it's consistent and we connect with our tenants. So that's the one thing I've heard from people, and especially the ones I think that are very engaged and have been successful in keeping up with the rents.
Mike, we'll look back at this time and we'll cringe a little bit, but I would also want to ask you kind of, blocking and tackling question when it comes to underwriting deals for folks that, just general banking guidelines. Most banks did not want you, if you lived in New Jersey, buying a deal in Arkansas, or you lived in Nevada, Las Vegas, buying a deal in Louisiana. They just didn't like the distance away to get to your asset. And that was, that is kind of banking 101. What do you think about this next go around with maybe some operators today that are out of area that have bought these assets because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac kind of didn't really care too much, that if you lived in New Jersey and you wanted to buy an asset in Texas and that asset had, I don't know if it would be a higher propensity to fail just because you weren't in that general area. I mean, then you always say, well, I really have my management company who's in that area looking at the deal. What's your general guidelines of underwriting these deals in the future?
I mean, I think if you're an ownership group with many years of experience and you have thousands of doors, the answer is one thing. And if you're the California 1031 buyer that we all always think of here in Texas, and you sold a single family house, or you sold a small commercial building and you're buying a 200 unit apartment in Texas, that's a whole different story. So I think it really comes down to the level of sophistication. But I think to take your question at face value, probably you're the California 1031 buyer or first time syndicator and you're buying across the nation. I think that's going to be one, probably painful right now, trying to keep your arms around the assets, especially when it's hard to travel across the country right now. It's exacerbated because it's like we all talked about some unprecedented times. It's hard to get on an airplane and come to Dallas to go see your asset, and the assets all closed. So I think those guys are probably likely to have a little bit more issues. And I think the banks, when they kind of do the postmortem, when this is all said and done, they go back to the natural bias they have, which is not to loan to out-of-towners, especially on from the regional bank standpoint. I don't know if Fannie Mae does that, but they'll probably be a little bit more strict on, who they loan money to for, several years, because they're going to see kind of how the performance of the assets actually happen. And there'll be some tendencies, I'm sure, within Fannie and Freddie that
that wasn't really an underwriting guideline, is that they didn't want, most large banks or credit unions did not want to lend outside of their geographic area, correct?
Yeah, and then when I worked for a regional bank, if you put the name California, or put the address of California on the borrower, that we would instantly have a negative reaction. Back when I was at a community or regional bank, or even at Wells Fargo for that matter, it was an uphill battle. I'm not saying we couldn't get over it, but it was an uphill battle. Just because, so many of those guys just came in and didn't understand the market. And those are guys that are going to buy, the higher crime, tougher locations that I've been beating the drum about for years that, really haven't mattered for years because everyone keeps making money and now they're not. So, I go back for 4 years and hear me say don't buy in the hood. And, that's not really mattered. And Jacob's been able to sell those buildings for you regardless. And then all of a sudden, I think when transactions do turn on, people are going to, if all the cap rates expand, at least temporarily, I'd rather buy in a better located deal. I'd rather buy in Plano than South Dallas. And so all the Plano deals are going to go first. And then we'll start working our way down the pecking order before you get to the late recovery markets, which were the high crime areas. So, all the cap rates being the same for the last several years, all the debt funds that are coming out, like I said, I'm fearful for people that have the high leverage debt fund, bridge loan. When they're in the middle of doing construction, they go spend all this money over the last couple of months. They go to submit their draw, and the lender tells them to pound sand because they're not going to fund their draw, and then they have all those payables, and then stuff just starts spiraling, and your lender's going to put a lockbox on you, potentially suck all your cash away, and then you're kind of in a death spiral, and then your area is in a high crime area, and your residents were living on the edge anyways, and this certainly puts them over the edge. And you can't collect, 60, 70% of your normal collections when the rest of the marketplace is in the mid-90s. I mean, those deals that's where the stress is going to be all in the marketplace. Jacob, I don't know if I went on a rant. Don't know if you agree with that or what you see.
Well, yeah, let's just ask Jacob on that. Jacob, on your big Rolodex of transactions, are the first persons that you call right now for yourself? Are they the people that have bridge loans that those deals may not be performing, or do you call the guys that have properties in less or in challenged demographic areas? Do you call the loans that are maturing here real soon? I mean, who are you calling right now?
Yeah, so I would say it's a mix between all the groups. But one statement I would make: there are tougher deals out there than others. There are good and bad locations. Now, if it's a good or bad deal, I don't know. I think it's all about the matchup and what you anticipate from an ownership side. And if you have the correct skill level to own in a tougher pocket, it can be a great deal. So one thing I do think we're going to see is some of these mismatches that's in the market. Those are the ones we're going to see go first, because it has been a question of checking all the boxes the last couple of years. And there might be 10 priority items when you go out and look at a deal, and the market dictates that you might be able to check 3 or 4 of them. And one of the things that I've seen people give up on is locations. And in a good market where everyone's got jobs and whatnot, that the deal doesn't really show up, the way it can in a market like this. So it's going to be interesting to see if some of these mismatches out there. Now, one thing I will say for the buying community out there is there's a perceived notion that there are deep discounts, and you can just go in and you can get a deal like back in 2012 with a huge discount, and it's going to be a huge win in the future. Now, those deals, they don't come with a bow on. They're going to be difficult, and there's not going to be a point where you're going to go in and there's going to be that perfect REO deal that is easy to do, and you can see how you're going to make money 12 months from now or 2 years from now. It's going to be tough no matter what. But I do agree with some of these deals we've seen in the market the last couple of years. I do think that we're going to see some of these mismatches coming out where people have bought or they have lessened their priority on location, and that's going to be tough. The other part, as you mentioned, Mike, is the bridge lenders. They can be a little tougher to deal with. We saw it in the last round that there are guys that are out there for option A, which is lending money to borrowers, and option B in short order is to take the deal back. And now we have it at a lower basis, and that is absolutely a part of a business plan. We will see kind of how it's too early to see who's going to perk up there. But it can be a very volatile situation, like Mike mentioned, where the CapEx dollars, they're being cut. We haven't seen that yet. And where you are more conservative pick, maybe a couple of years ago with a Fannie or Freddie Mac execution, is really holding its own right now.
That makes me think of, guys kind of going long here, but kind of as we wrap up, makes me think of the first transaction that the three of us ever did together was Jacob sold it without naming names or locations exactly, but sold a pretty tough deal that had an extreme amount of deferred maintenance and high vacancy back in 2012 that Paul brokered over to me to finance. Paul found the buyer and I financed him. I was at Wells Fargo. And I remember thinking about the guy that we made the loan to, Paul, and ultimately he had to get kicked out of the deal and replaced with another asset manager. I remember thinking at the time, like, and this is a hard deal, and the guy kind of seemed soft to me, but we did the loan anyways, and ultimately everything got fine because we had pretty low LTV and some additional money escrowed. But I think coming out of this, I think everyone's going to learn that you can't do hard deals with soft people and have good outcomes. So there's a lot of hard deals out there that have been bitten off the last couple of years, and those that are soft are going to have bad outcomes. So that's what I foresee. So I guess we'll see who's soft and not here in a few months.
Spot on.
Well, this has not been a show about nothing. This is not a Jerry Seinfeld episode, but hopefully we'll get the ratings like Jerry Seinfeld, because it's a show about something. And I think Jacob brought a lot of great information to the show, and we really do appreciate your help in educating us about what's going on, Mike. I think we do definitely have Jacob on again, hopefully in the next couple weeks, just to have his ear that's down to the ground, help us give everybody a listen to about what's happening out there. So Jacob Andersen with Newmark. If someone wanted to get a hold of you, Jacob, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
They can email me, Jacob, Jakob .Andersen, and that's spelled Andersen at ngkf.com. So Jacob.Andersen at ngkf.com. They can also try my direct number here is 214-460-6536. 214-460-6536.
That's fantastic. So very much appreciate Jacob Andersen with Newmark on the podcast with us today. Michael Becker.
Absolutely.
Stay safe, and we will talk to you soon. Again, I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.